Talent underground, where the dreams all surround. Creativity unbound. Feel the beat, hear the sound.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Talent Underground, the show where we shine a light on rising stars and creative voices making waves in the local community. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by award-winning playwright James Elazzi. James has made an incredible impact with his powerful storytelling and his latest play, Saints of Damour. In no exception, set against the backdrop of the 1970s, Lebanon, and spanning continents and decades, it is a moving exploration of love, migration, and identity. Themes that resonate so deeply with many of us. We're going to dive into the inspiration behind this story, the journey of its characters, and what it means to embrace our truth when the past keeps calling. I've got James with me now. James, it's so great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
I appreciate how you feeling this morning. Great.
Yeah, really great. Really pumped. Can't wait to share this story with everyone.
Of course, man. It's super interesting. So let's just delve right into it. So what inspired you to tell this story? It's particularly set in the 1970s Lebanon.
It's I've been writing it for about 7 years, and I felt in the stage of storytelling in this country, we don't have our stories or our voices predominantly heard, and it's my mission to give a voice to the generation before me, and also to the generations coming after me. We have trailblazers in our culture, and I want to just give a voice to that, to the strong people and strong families that have made a new kind of world here for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it seems like a lot of the story come from your own personal experiences. So how much of this story is drawn from real life experience, particularly ones that you've encountered within this community? I mean, there's stories of displacement, a huge focal point on identity. How much of it relates to you as a person?
Saints of Damour is purely based on real life events from things that have happened to people in my family. And I've been researching and going through the motions of this story for the last 7 years. So it is very close to home. And it's a world that I'm very, very particular with, and I understand very well.
It's clearly very evident in that. I mean, let's talk a little bit more about the central themes, which I believe are migration and identity. How important was it for you to reflect the Lebanese Australian experience when you were telling the story?
It was incredibly important. I feel for my generation, I was born in Australia, but for my parents, and the play it begins in the 70s, just before the Civil War breaks out, and it's also about and war and what it can do to you. So the war breaks out, and my protagonist in the play gets into an arranged marriage, and he migrates to Queensland, and then eventually to Sydney. And I call it the broken clock syndrome. But it's what happens when you are forced, or you have to leave the country that you know, and create a world or a life for yourself in a foreign country. What do you hold on to, and what do you leave behind? And this is what I am fascinated with in this story. But this story also circles around a romantic relationship, but it also and the breakdown of relationships within the family construct. So there's all these things happening, and migration is a huge thing. It's a huge theme within the work that I try to flesh out and explore.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely evident. So more on the migration, it starts off in Lebanon to Queensland and then eventually to Sydney. How did you decide from setting it in those three different settings?
Well, they're based on real life events. So basically, my parents left Damour, which is the title of the work. It's a seaside village in Lebanon. And when they migrated here, we had old family, part of the Lebanese hawkers, who used to roam around Queensland selling curtains, silk, and gowns made out of silk. And there was already a community in regional Queensland. And so when they migrated to Queensland, they tried to make a life for themselves. But of course, that life is so different to cosmopolitan Beirut. And then through the trials and tribulations of trying to man a farm and also a little grocery store. They just couldn't do it, and so they decided to migrate to where the rest of their relatives and the people from the villages were migrating to, and that was Sydney, inner West Sydney, and that's the way the story follows. And the play also deals with how they dealt with racism at the time. And it's not the typical stereotypical kind of racism that we understand today. It's much more different to that. And it's all detailed within the work.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it would have been something else. I mean, this clearly isn't your first rodeo when it comes to playwriting, but just how special was this one when it came to turning your family's experience into a performance, a play? Can you just talk us a little bit about the whole process of not just the production, but seeing your writing eventually lead to being brought to life?
It's incredibly I'm incredibly grateful that every team that I've had on work that I've written has fallen in love with the work, and it comes from a place inside. And you have to, I think, be touched by the migrant experience, or what that means, the trials that these people go through, these families go through, and it still happens today. But what does it mean when you are an actor and you have to really transform yourself into these characters, and what does it mean to bring these worlds alive for an audience? So when I'm sitting in there in the first sort of dress rehearsal, or the first previews, it is really it makes me proud of the work that I've been doing, particularly this work that has been on my mind for a very long time, and it's just found a home here, in this company called Qtopia, when they had heard the story. And yeah, it feels really, I'm empowered by it, and I hope that I empower audiences that come to see the work too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a huge aspect of it. Obviously, wanting to inspire people, and you bring a lot of powerful messages forth. I mean, one of them is living authentically. What do you hope audiences take away from Pierre's journey? Not just living authentically, but I suppose just as a whole, including the fact that your families lived through a lot of these experiences.
I think I think I touched on the broken clock syndrome, where families that migrate from whatever country they come from, and then they come to the new country, they hold on to their culture, and the aesthetics of religion and culture and heritage and what that means, but there's no evolution and there's no progression. And what I mean by living authentically is to make sure that you progress as an individual as well within those constraints and constructions of culture. So, for example, um, I talk about myself a hybrid culture where, if you're wedged between, well, I was born here, but I grew up not really belonging here, and then you go back to your parents' homeland, you really don't belong there. So where do you belong? And I know this is a phenomenon that a lot of second generation migrants go through, and so I call it a hybrid culture, where you take the best bits out of both cultures and you make your own.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something I personally feel like a lot of people are going to relate to, not just within the Arab community, but also just as a whole, a lot of migrants. So let's talk about the Arab Australian voice that you project, not just within this work, but within all your work. What draws you to these stories personally, and why do you think that these are sort of things that need to be told?
I think first of all, there's been a lot of stereotypes. However funny they are, and however entertaining they are, these stereotypes have been embedded in our everyday life, and in the mainstream of Lebanese Arab culture. And I don't, I'm not familiar with that. I don't understand that, and I just want to propel our voices, the trailblazing women in our families, the men that have started with nothing, and families that move on to success within a foreign in a foreign world. And I think it's so important that we give voice to our culture in a positive way, because we have incredible stories, but we haven't cultivated a bunch of storytellers from our culture to tell these stories. First of all, because traditionally there was no place for us, um, in the landscape of storytelling in Australia, and so we have to start from with the ground up. But I don't want to. I'm not dissing any other sort of form of storytelling, whether it's comedic or whatever it is. Like it is what it is, and they've got their audience. But I want to be on par with the best storytellers in this country, using our culture, and the beautiful stories that we have. That's why I'm drawn to telling Lebanese Australian stories. That's important to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, playwriting and what you're doing is a very unique way to tell these stories, not just from the perspective of storytelling as a whole, but also within the Arab community. I feel like there aren't a whole lot of playwrights that are doing what you do, the way you do it, and the way that you tell these stories. It's not just something that resonates with the older generation, but I also feel like you probably got a huge fan base when it comes to the current generation, just because of how relatable this work is. So, delving back into your previous works, I mean, Lady Tabuli, Son of Bilbos. How does Saints of Damour almost build on top of these things or continue to evolve from your previous works?
The Lady Tabule and Son of Biblos all deal with identity, but from a different perspective, and they're completely in different worlds. Saints of Damour is an epic journey that follows a very Australian story that we just haven't heard before. We have our Australian stories, and the country knows that these are the traditional Australian stories, but that's not true, because migration has a huge part to play in the fabric of this nation. We just haven't heard those stories before. And so, with this story in particular, Sense of Damour, if it does follow the journey of a family, and the communities that this family are part of, and how they play into those communities. So, for example, there's a farming community in Damour in Lebanon, and the that region of Lebanon is known to be tomato and Lebanese cucumber farmers. But once they migrate to Queensland and then to Sydney, they've got to change who and how they navigate in this new world here. And I think and family is a huge part in this story as well. Whereas those other two works are very much based on a singular perspective of the world. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like I said, it definitely seems like you've got a pretty deep understanding. I'm pretty curious as to how you got into playwriting as a whole, not just, I suppose, within this sort of sphere, but have you had to face any challenges given that you're an Australian Lebanese writer?
Huge challenges, huge, and I still do face them. Uh, how did I become a playwright? Um, it, it's such a roundabout way, and everyone's journey is different. But when I was when I just finished high school, I was always drawn to telling stories. I think that's what I've been made to do, and so I would smash up these plays at night time and go to work during the day. I don't have anyone in my family that come from playwriting, film, or TV. I have nobody, and so, but I was drawn to this world, and so what I would do is I would write at night time and then go to work during the day, and I just kept doing it, and I kept getting rejected and rejected and rejected, and I just kept. It's that story where you just can't give up, especially in such a really hard industry to crack. And I think bit by bit, you start to slowly itch your way up, create a core audience that come to your work. And if they're drawn by that piece of work, they will come to the next one, and then the next one. And then every time you have a piece of work, you have a core audience that will come to your work. Now, I'm a true believer that you don't need to put on work in the traditional sense of the companies that exist. For example, Sydney Theatre Company. I think every company play that stages work have a specific culture within their walls, and to break those is so difficult. But I have worked in all those companies. I have worked in Sydney Theatre Company, Belvoir, National Theatre of Parramatta, and I have been there, and I understand how they all work. And so and it still doesn't make it any easier. Uh, they you they know that you need to cultivate a new audience, and that new audience needs to start from scratch, and it takes years to cultivate an audience. So there's an audience for the Asian community that has erupted in the last 10 years, but for us, it takes a while because I'm giving a different perspective of what it means to be Australian, and a lot and it's traditionally the audience is very white, very upper middle class that go to the theater.
Mhm.
And my work is not aimed at that, even though that's the majority of the audience that still comes to my work, and I love that. I love that I can give them another perspective of Australia that's so close to me. But to get the other audience, the diaspora of the Lebanese community, the Arab Mediterranean kind of kids that can kind of that have never been to the theater and come to see my work, that's a hard thing to crack. And I'm trying to do it as much as I can.
Yeah, look, it's definitely not something to crack. It's definitely not going to be easy. I mean, and you also speak on how hard of an industry it is to get into. I mean, you're talking to a journalist about how hard it is to crack into an industry. I can totally relate to you on that one. So, I mean, more on that note, what sort of advice would you give to not just these young kids that you're trying to reach out to and trying to build an audience around, but just to young Arab Australian writers as a whole that are just trying to kind of get their name out there and make a name for themselves in such a hard industry to get into?
Um, write what you know. That I can't emphasize that anymore. Write what you know because of rejections, and you need to be emotionally driven by what you write. And if you can do that, no matter how many rejections you get, you will get one person that will give an opportunity for you to put on a work. No matter how small that platform is, take it. Take any opportunity you can get. Nothing is too good for you. Start from scratch and just write what you know. Steer away from, like I was talking about before, about the stereotypes that exist, because they're already done, and they will always be done because people love to laugh at others and love to be entertained, but we can entertain them in a different way that has more depth. So yeah, write as much as you can, and then write some more because writing takes a certain skill that you can't master at the beginning. It's like a muscle. You need to just keep working at it, working out, and then yeah, put your work out there, talk about your work, and eventually an audience will start to slowly grow. And this is regardless whether it's stage, whether it's film, and whether it's TV.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same way.
I mean, pretty well said. Any closing words, I suppose, about the performance itself, where people can find Saints of Damour, how many shows you're going to be putting on any of that stuff? Any promo?
Yeah, the show is at Qtopia in the city, and it opens up on March the 19th and goes all the way to April the 5th. And you can just type Saints of Damour on the internet, and a link will come up where all the details are. Just type in the title of the name, and that should give you everything you need to know.
Sweet. Look, that wraps up our time for today. Thank you so much. And definitely an interesting production, one that I think will have a lot of eyes around it. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I feel like needs to be said in the sense that it's a community where it's definitely been a lot of struggle for the Arab Australian communities, not just coming into the country, but then also settling in. And I'm super keen to see how you tell the story.
Thanks, Joseph. I really appreciate that.
It's all good. Thank you so much for having us. Awesome. And yeah, we're going to be leaving all the socials, your social accounts, how to get tickets, all on the Oz Arab Media post, everywhere this interview is published. So be sure to check it out. Thank you so much for your time,
My
James.
pleasure. Thank you.